everyone, and welcome to the Computer Science and Engineering panel. My name is Dr. Jennifer Winward. I'm the founder and CEO of Winward Academy, and I'm really excited to be here with all of you today to welcome our esteemed panelists. Today, we're going to hear from three consummate professionals in the computer science and engineering fields. Though I did get an email from Miss Robertson from Jamila, so she might have had a work thing come up, so hopefully she'll be able to join us. If not, we will have Sadia, Naseem, and Tyrone Jacobs Jr. with us today. And after chatting with them, I do want to make sure that you all know that we are going to then go to you if you have any questions to ask them. So we're going to kind of chat with each one of them individually and then bring it back at the end with all of them to see if you have any questions. One thing too, we're going to actually put a link in the chat to a PDF document that has all of their bios. So I really encourage you to read a little bit more about them. So then, of course, you can ask more informed questions about their background or about their experiences. Just want to give you a quick background on the career panel. So it is proudly presented by the Carol Kimmelman Athletic and Academic Campus, or CCAC. For those of you who might not be aware, CCAC is going to be a world-class facility breaking ground in early 2021 in Carson. It is going to be the largest academic and athletic campus in the country, serving over 20,000 students in LA and beyond, thanks to partnerships with the USTA Foundation, Tiger Woods Foundation, Disney, ESPN, AEG, LA Galaxy, the Karsh family, and Winward Academy. So lots of great organizations working together on this project. On behalf of all of us supporting CCAC, we thank, of course, our nonprofit and school partners for collaborating with us on this panel and for participating with us today. So I know we have a lot of teachers who are on the call and actually live streaming this to their classes. So just want to give a very warm welcome to all of you who are joining us. Now it's time to meet your esteemed panelists. So today we will be joined by Jamila Robertson, who is a product designer at Facebook, by Sadia Naseem, who is a hardware productization engineer. I'm excited we're going to learn what that means at Apple, and also Tyrone Jacobs Jr., who is a commodity engineer at Northrop Grumman Corporation. So lots of incredible people joining us today. Also joining us is a student co-moderator who's going to be helping me ask questions. His name is Raul Palomo, and he is a junior at Rice University in Houston, where he is majoring in computer science. Actually, last year, he was a software engineering intern at Google. So I'm hoping we'll get to learn a little bit from him about that. And also, he is in a club. It's called the Remix CS Club, and he actually teaches Python programming to high school students in Houston. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'd love to welcome Raul and also Sadia Naseem to please turn on their cameras and their microphones, and we're going to get started with our questions. Hello, Miss Naseem, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you great. How about me?
Perfect. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you the first question. You have quite an impressive array of companies where you've worked: Texas Instruments, Qualcomm, Apple. You know, sometimes people hear about that and think that everything is just so easy, right? Sometimes when you have those types of credentials, can you maybe share a little bit more about your background and kind of from where you get your motivation?
For sure. So yeah, I mean, I am the same way. I mean, when I see that list of names, next to my resume, sometimes it doesn't even feel like, that it should be associated with me. And, it's so different from how I grew up and where I came from. And so my parents, they came to this country with literally nothing. And our whole lives really just did whatever they could to make sure we had food on the table and we had a roof over our head. But, growing up, there was a big part of me that used to feel like, my parents, don't get to come and pick me up from school, and they don't, get to get me the best tutors or get me into the best schools. They weren't always physically present because they were always working so many jobs. And, as a kid, it was really easy for me to feel like, I have less. But it really wasn't until high school where I had to sit down and start thinking about college and writing these college essays, where I started to realize, wait a minute, everything that I viewed as baggage or things that were, shortcomings in my life, all of a sudden this is content. These are things that I can actually write about and in some ways frame to show that those challenges and those shortcomings, they actually were opportunities. Because what I didn't realize was, even though what I thought was all of these hardships onto my life, they actually taught me how to problem solve. Working 2 jobs in college taught me how to budget, how to prioritize my time, how to have to make quick decisions. And honestly, all of those things that were just annoying at that time are what I get paid to do in the real world today. And I was getting training on the job much younger than others get to because of those shortcomings. So if there's anything I leave with or want to leave the students with today, it's really, especially in a world of social media or in a place where you are constantly comparing about what you don't have to millions of people at this point, it's really important to keep perspective. You can dream, you can set goals, you can use what you see around you as a source of motivation, but who you are and where you come from, that's actually going to empower you. And that's really going to be, those experiences are going to give you the tools so that you can stand apart and really make a story for yourself. So I didn't get to these companies and things by going to the best schools or because my parents, paid their way through in some way. It was literally, I could tell a story about where I came from and show through my experiences that I had skill sets that were valuable.
Great. And Raul, I know that you have a question for Miss Naseem. Did you want to jump in?
Yeah, actually, I have a couple of questions. So when I think of like traditional tech companies such as like Texas Instruments or Qualcomm, like I'm sort of thinking of, the usual like corporate setting. But when I think of like new tech companies like Apple or Facebook, I sort of think of fun, like is with like a different culture that's being involved. Am I right or wrong about that? And then just sort of from your experience, how do you recommend finding a company that fits, whose culture like fits your personality?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question because especially when you're a student or when you're going through school, it's hard to imagine what the real world is like. And all we see is that the cool place to work is Facebook, Apple, Google, Microsoft, these big name companies that touch users every single day. But what a lot of people don't realize is that they are held to that level and that esteem because they're powered by workhorses and lots of people that put in a lot of time every single day from early morning often to late evenings to make those products and to make those experiences possible for users. So as much as I love the idea of how much fun you can have at work, I do think it's important to tear the curtain down a little bit and be honest about the fact that these companies and that esteem comes with a lot of hard work. And so although you really have fun with the products you're making, you have fun being driven by the fact that, yeah, I'm going to get to make the next iPhone, I'm going to get to contribute to the next MacBook. There is I'm in meetings from 8 a.m. to 6, 7 p.m. And that's also important to consider into that equation. Some of the other companies I've worked at, Texas Instruments, Qualcomm, these are still huge companies, over 30,000 employees worldwide. But one of the things that also carries value is that in those jobs, I could finish 5, 6 o'clock and go for a run on the beach in San Diego because that was something that was enabled by the culture there. So every company kind of has pros and cons. But what I would say about finding your fit is that we today live in a world where companies, especially tech companies, are changing so rapidly. In fact, if a company wasn't able to adapt to change, they wouldn't survive as a tech company. I mean, if you just look at the last 5 to 10 years, any piece of technology you had is outdated and probably not used anymore. So these companies are very flexible and constantly changing, and that goes into the culture itself. Because when we come in, especially as millennials and Gen Z are coming into jobs, we're replacing a 40-year-old mindset. And in a lot of ways, just by us getting there, cultures are already shifting. So I wouldn't put too much importance on finding a job based on the cultural fit, because what you'll find is that so much of that is also defined by who your manager is and who your teammates are. And if they are very closed off and never want to come out of their cubes, you have to kind of help and pull them out of that. And I've found that in any of my situations where I was often 20 years younger than everybody else on my team, maybe the only woman in the room. And those challenges although present, we're up to me to start to kind of bridge those gaps. So culture is one of those things I would say is very flexible, especially in the tech industry. And I encourage you to lead by example if you end up in a situation where maybe everybody isn't like you. But I wouldn't necessarily make my decision in terms of what job to take or not take simply on culture, because there's so much more that kind of goes into whether or not that job is a good fit for you.
Yeah, thanks so much. And then just as a final question, more on like, I guess the technical side, like, what exactly is a hardware productization engineer? And could you explain like your role more? And I guess, can you tell us of any new things that are coming to Apple that you're allowed to say?
Yeah, for sure. So the world of tech is often confusing to everyone. Even I'm in it and I can't tell you half of what people do. So if I had to put it simply, there's kind of two buckets that a lot of people fall into: software and hardware. Software are the things you can't physically go and touch. That is the code, the programming, the thing that our computer scientist friends spend hours writing. And those are the things that really are the brain power behind how our technology works. Then there's the hardware itself. That is your physical phone. That's if you open up your phone and all those chips that you see, things that you can physically touch, we call that hardware. So when we talk about hardware productization, what that really means in simple terms is everything starts out as a design or a concept or an idea, but somebody has to really be able to take that into an actual product and make millions of it and make sure that every single piece that is shipped has been tested and works perfectly. We don't want to ship iPhones that don't work. So there are teams that really drive that process from concept to production. And that's what my team does. So some genius had some idea of what to put in the new iPhone, but that was just an idea. Now I will work with test teams. I will work with manufacturing teams. I will work with planning teams to make sure that that concept is able to get built, tested, and shipped. So that's really what I get to do in my role. And it's very collaborative with lots of teams. And so you asked if I could share anything. So honestly, this is one of the most secret companies in that sense that I have worked with. There's definitely a lot of things that we don't like to disclose, but it's not to maintain the secret for the sake of being secret. It's really all about Apple loves surprises. They love being able to surprise the user and be like, you know what, we're just going to drop this on you. And that's really, that element of surprise is what keeps the company so driven and motivated each year to launch something. But one thing I can talk about is Apple is in a phase right now where they're trying to design all of their own chips. And if anybody follows the company, what they might have learned is that we released our first MacBooks that actually have our own chips inside instead of buying from Intel. So what that really means is that as a company, we can customize these products even more. We can make the experience even more personal because now we have more and more control over every single component that's going into these devices. So it's an exciting time for sure to be a part of a team where you can really say at the end of the day, when you hold up your MacBook or your phone, that I played a part in every single component in this, or at least over 90% of the components in that. But yeah, can't give away too many secrets beyond that. You guys have to stay tuned.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, that is so interesting, so exciting. It sounds like your career, oh, sorry, it sounds like there's a little echo. It sounds like your career has just, is in a meteoric rise, which is so exciting. So I just want to thank you again for taking time with us. Quick reminder to those of you on the call, remember, if you have any questions for Ms. Naseem or for any of the other panelists, please put them in the Q&A. We're going to transition now to to Ms. Robertson, to Jamila, who's going to share more about her work at Facebook. But Sadia will be back at the end with the Q&A with everyone. So again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the Q&A. And we will go ahead and transition now. Ms. Robertson, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. And I don't know if you're in a place where you can turn on your camera so that we can see you. Okay,
Yes,
okay, perfect. And Raul, I know that you have some questions for Jamila. So did you want to maybe start by throwing out the first question for her?
Yeah, of course. So I see that before you joined Facebook, you were a UX designer at Riot Games, which produced games like League of Legends, one of the most popular games to date. What was it like to work on that big of a game?
Yeah, so working at Riot was a great experience. I will say that I am not a huge gamer. And so I was not actually familiar with League of Legends when I started there originally in 2012. But over time, learned a lot about the community and the players and grew to appreciate it just as much. And so in everything that I did as a designer, I really had to think through. I think as a UX designer, my role is to champion for the players. And so really getting to know them and recognizing the impact that my work was having and how many lives it was touching in lots of different ways was really influential on me. And especially I think this year with COVID, looking at the way that video games has helped to bring people together really helped to cement, the impact of the work that we were doing there.
Yeah, thanks so much. And then could you tell us a bit about like sort of what your transition from Riot to Facebook was like? Sort of like what made you leave Riot and join Facebook?
Yeah, so as much as I enjoyed my time at Riot, I was there for 8 years. Sometimes it is time to move on in order to continue to grow and to stretch yourself. And I felt that in my time there, I had worked on League of Legends, I had worked on platform and helped to ship all of the games that Riot shipped last year. And when I looked around internally at what the opportunities were for me, I felt like in order to grow, I had to push myself outside of Riot and do something that was going to be different and a little more difficult. I think it's easy to get really comfortable at a place and found that I could stay there and continue to be comfortable, or I could go somewhere and really start to work on some new to me problems and sort of be a beginner again, somewhere new. So that's what led me to Facebook. And now I work in VR. So I'm still working somewhat in like the game space, but virtual reality is completely new to me. So even though I am tenured in my career, I feel like a beginner all over again. And that was really important for me.
Yeah, and then just one last question. Could you explain more like what the details of being a product designer are and what it exactly means?
Yeah. So my role as a designer is really to wear lots of different hats, right? So I think I'm responsible for championing for the user and what their experience is. So when you're developing a product, it's not just about like what is going to benefit sort of the business and the organization's bottom line, but also, at the end of the day, we're making things for people to use. So we need to be thinking about the people. So that is like first and foremost is me making sure that I'm like reminding the team that there are people problems that we're trying to solve and how do we define those things and then develop the best experience for them. I think that's one part of it. The other part of it is also product strategy and thinking about like how do these things overlap of like what people need and what their interests are, but also how do we benefit the business at the same time, and how do we start to like plan for a rollout of a product. And then, the more kind of tactical part of it is actually designing the pixels, right? And thinking about sort of what is a user's journey through an experience from the time they first learn about it through sort of like retention and then continuing to come back to it. And so as a product designer, I am more on the like UX and strategic side than the visual design side. So I do a lot of drawing of what I call gray boxes. If you think about like building a house, right? There is an architecture for the house and a layout. So I do a lot of the layout of like, where do buttons go? What happens when someone clicks on something? Like, how should they progress? And then I work really closely with visual designers to an artist to help layer in the really nice kind of elements to make it sort of shippable to people. As a product designer, there are lots of different hats you can wear. Product design is kind of like a general term. So there are some people who are more visually inclined than they are strategic, and some people who are prototypers who are actually like building kind of click-throughs of those wireframes and things like that. But it runs the gamut of like thinking about the user and then defining what is an ideal experience for them, but also thinking about the edge cases and then laying everything out in screens, which to me is like the fun part.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing those insights. So I do have another question for you. So Jamila, you have a very impressive educational background, right? Studying computer science, getting a master's in human computer interaction. So clearly you are very passionate about your career in computer science. What advice would you give to students who have similar interests?
Yeah, I would say there are lots of ways to work in tech. I think traditionally the first thought for people is like, I have to be an engineer. And the reality is there are lots of other jobs. And so that's why for me, I went from computer science in undergrad and like doing internships, which I think are really, really important and really helpful to get real world experience. And I recognize I didn't want to do that every day. Even at 21, I was like, no, I don't think I want to do this, which is what led me to human computer action and really looking at design and research and that side of it. And so I would say to continue to explore different paths within tech. My husband also works in tech, but he started as an educator and now he works on the L&D team. He's in the background. So now he's on the learning and development team at Riot, so there are lots of, the tech companies that we work for, like Facebook and like a Riot, are, legitimate corporations that have lots of different facets. And so if you try one thing and that doesn't work for you, that doesn't mean that tech is not for you. And it may just be that you need to explore some different lanes.
Yeah, that's great. So we do, and I want to recognize the people in the audience who have put some great questions into the Q&A. I promise we will come back to those. For now, what we're going to do is go ahead and transition from Jamila to Tyrone so we can hear more from him. And then we'll welcome all of the presenters back at the end to do the Q&A. So thanks again, Jamila. We'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, Tyrone, welcome. I know that Raul has a question for you to get it started. So Raul, go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, so I see that you're a commodity engineer at Northrop Grumman. And I guess just sort of, this is just a general question. Could you describe sort of what other careers you can get from STEM instead of, the traditional like software engineering career? And does a STEM education eventually always lead up to a job in corporate America?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of careers you can, career avenues and pathways. I mean, you can achieve besides just coding or like a programmer or a software engineer. I mean, my role is I work on space and satellite hardware. So that's something that's not coding, right? You can work on the electrical, outlets that you see, like when you're driving like on the highway, you see those big, long, huge towers. You can work on those as an engineer. I mean, especially in the aerospace industry, I mean, there's a lot of different roles you can get into that's not necessarily coding or programming. So the thing I love about STEM is that the possibilities are endless and you can literally pretty much do anything. I mean, it seems like at times. So yeah, there's a lot of different roles you can definitely get into besides being a programmer or a coder. But as your second question, I guess it's a case-by-case basis. For me, my story with STEM is a little different. I wasn't a kid that worked on, or just had a dream of like being an engineer. So as I got older, I spent a lot of time like in the house. So I spent a lot of time on the computer and like doing things with technology. So then I went to a technical academy that my uncle recommended I go to for high school. And then that birthed like my ambition to achieve an engineering degree or wanting to become an engineer in the first place. Because a lot of times, a lot of people, they say, I knew since I was 3 years old, out the womb, I was going to be an engineer, right? I don't have that type of story with it. It's a little different. But I would say if you do the proper work, like as in like undergrad, and you do the proper things, like as you're in college, your success rate of getting a job will be a lot higher. Now, it's not always promised, right? Because some certain companies have certain criteria, certain things that they look for and that they want out of a candidate. So to just say that it always will lead up to a job would be unrealistic. But to say that if you do the right things while you're in college, as far as like working hard, your good grades, being involved, networking, meeting your professors and just people like that, if you do those things, then your success rate of getting that job that you want is, at least 85-90% or higher, right? So that's kind of my idea on that.
Thank you.
That's awesome. And I'm going to jump in here with a question kind of based to piggyback off what you shared about STEM and, that STEM is very broad. There's this movement with STEAM, right? To actually add the arts to STEM. Given what Jamila shared about, her role as an engineer, but it's all part of virtual reality or part of gaming, right? Like clearly art can be a part of science and technology and engineering and math. What about your career trajectory? Like, how does it include the arts, even though you're working on satellite hardware?
Well, if I'm going to be completely 100% honest, it does not at all include the arts. I mean, at least my career doesn't. But to say that arts and STEM is a bad thing is wrong, because, I mean, you have liberal arts, you have music, you have literature, English. These are all things that can make the field of STEM more creative and more engaging for people and like little kids and for students to get involved. So that's my mission behind it, is how can we get more of the little ones out there interested in STEM topics and STEM work and STEM careers and STEM pathways, right? So that's my driving force behind what I do. So for my career, I don't really see arts applying so much, but it does not mean that it does not apply to other careers, and it does not mean that it's a bad thing by throwing in the A, right? Because some people are like, oh, wait, no, it's STEM. Like, why are we doing this STEAM thing? Like, whoa, that's wrong. Like, we don't know what that is. But I mean, I accept it. Because like I said, right, if you have music, literature, all these different fields, those are all arts, creative arts. So the more you kind of involve that, it kind of broadens the field of more people who have those backgrounds to maybe pursue an actual STEM pathway with just the art splash on it, right? So yeah, I mean, by kind of involving the arts, I mean, that's nothing but a positive thing to me. And it will only advance the field of STEM or STEAM further than I think, we've pretty much ever seen it go before. So, I mean, I'm definitely cool with it. Yeah.
That's great. Well, we have so many great questions that have been put in the Q&A. So I would love to welcome back Sadia and Jamila. If you guys want to turn on your cameras and your microphones again, we'll start going through some of the questions from the audience. It looks like our first question is from someone who would like to know some keys to succeed in a corporate environment. So maybe some tips about personality traits, the way that you approach your work, kind of those types of things. What do you see as the keys to success? And maybe Sadia, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. So I think one of the things that often gets lost is as much as your technical abilities and your degrees and all that open doors for you, actually being successful in a lot of these roles really comes down to soft skills. And one of the things, especially when you're new, you feel like you don't know anything. Everybody around you knows more than you. And actually asking questions and being curious is something that it doesn't matter where you are or what industry you're in, that's so instrumental to you being able to build up your toolkit. Because don't ever take for granted that everyone knows everything. They probably don't. And when you start to ask questions and in your own mind, put together the puzzle, I think it really equips you with kind of this holistic view that then, you can start contributing more once you get an understanding. So I would say ask questions, be curious, and don't feel like you have to, as much as you have a job and a role, it's not a box that you fit into. There is always areas where there is room for creativity. It kind of goes into the same art comment we were having before. All of these fields, there is always that element of how can I make this look better? How can I make this a bit more approachable? How can I add a little bit of a personal touch to it? All of that requires that creativity in art, and you can always put your personal touch on things. So don't be afraid to step out of what you're being told to do and ask if you can add some of those personal touches. I think that's really what starts to set people apart.
Great. Jamila, anything to add, kind of success or keys to success in corporations?
Yeah, I think Sadia hit on some really key points, especially around asking questions. I think there is sometimes a tendency to feel like you have to know everything, like you got hired to do a job, and so therefore you're an expert and you should know everything. And the reality is sometimes during hiring, we're also looking at like, is this person teachable, right? Like, are they curious and things like that? So don't be afraid to ask questions. I would also say, control the things that you can control. It can feel like the right thing to do sometimes to focus on things that are outside of your control. But the reality is like building relationships, executing on the work that is sort of in front of you, and like planning for the future are the things that you can control. You can't necessarily control someone else's behavior or their response. So I really think like, looking at the things that you can control. And when you start something new, I've just been through this, starting something new and asking, how do you think that I can add the most value, right? And like really being clear on sort of what the expectations are.
Great. And Tyrone, I know that you've worked in a lot of corporations. Any pointers for students?
I mean, honestly, I would be sitting here all day giving pointers if I could, honestly. But I mean, kind of like how I alluded to a little earlier, right? Like, you want to perform as best as possible while you're in school in undergrad. Definitely do your thing, work hard, study hard. You want to network with your professors and your deans of like your colleges and administrators on your campus, because they can open doors for you that maybe you could not have opened just as a student. And I know, because the things that I'm saying right now are things that I did to get me to where I am, right? So you network, try to get as good grades as possible. And pretty much from there, be involved, get involved with some organizations on campus that tailor to your interests, to tailor to your hobbies and things that you like. And that was pretty much my formula for success in college. So, I mean, as long as you stick to your guns and like don't let anybody take you off of your element or your framing or who you are as a person or individual, and you study, you work hard, you network, and you try to build a good reputation for yourself. I mean, the sky's the limit. I mean, you'll definitely shoot off like a rocket ship, for sure.
And of course, that's your metaphor, right? A rocket ship, since you work in aerospace, that has to be the way you think of things.
Yeah. So yeah, not only that, but my alma mater, like our what do you call it?
Your logo
Our logo is a rocket, right? We're known as Rockets, right? So there you get it in undergrad, and then you get it, in your actual work, with your corporate America. So yeah, man, I mean, just work hard, study, network, and get involved, and there you have it.
Yeah, that's great. So another question in here is from a student, kind of for each of you. People are presuming here that you have to have a lot of good math skills in the work that you're all doing. Is that true? Are there places, if you're not good at math, or if you're afraid of really tough math courses? I see a lot of smiles and a lot of nodding heads.
Okay, let me open up with this one real quick if I can. I'll say for me, I started off in like really basic algebra, right? When I came into college. So I didn't start off in Calc 1 and Calc 2 when I'm doing double, triple integrals out the gate. No, I started at the very bottom of the mathematics totem pole. But I worked my way up to get to Calc 1 and Calc 2, Calc 3, differential equations, all the hard stuff, right? And I was told at the time, like, hey, like, you're not ready for engineering because your ACT score, your ACT score is too low. Like, you're not ready for an engineering program. You're not engineering ready, right? So I had to kind of start in some basic level classes and work my way up. But that just shows you right there, okay, you can start in pre-algebra and still work at Northrop Grumman, like one of the top 2-3 aerospace companies in the world as a commodity engineer, and still make some things happen, although you started at the bottom in mathematics, right? So no, you don't need to already have strong mathematic core skills to succeed in engineering or to succeed in your degree, because I did not start that way. So I had to kind of work to it and get to that level. And I'm thankful that I'm here now, but it wasn't always this way, right?
So it sounds like you didn't need it in the beginning. You
Right.
just did the determination to not give up as your classes were advancing in difficulty.
That's the key to succeed in engineering and STEAM and STEM, is to not give up and to be persistent. I mean, that's just life in general, right? That's for any of our goals and our dreams in life. But you got to keep going when it gets hard. And a lot of people, they quit when it gets hard and they end up switching or they drop out of the program, this and that. And I had moments like that going into college. I'm the only person in my family to go to college, not only just to go, but to pursue an engineering degree. And then you consider my background, how I grew up. It's like, no, people like him don't make it to stuff like this, later in life. So yeah, like you said, right? Never give up. Keep going. Keep trucking. Be persistent, and have that heart. And like you'll definitely succeed.
Great. Jamila, anything to add about the math question?
Yeah. In my time as a computer science student, there were difficult math classes. I will say leveraging the resources that are available to you. Again, when you're in school, you are learning, and there isn't an expectation that you know everything, right? And you don't have to figure it out by yourself. And I think that is one of the things that a lot of people miss in their collegiate experience is there are tons of resources. There are tutors, there are TAs, there are all of these things available to you where you don't have to do it on your own. And so statistics was very difficult to me, or for me. I started taking it once and realized I didn't want to take it, but I had to take it to graduate. And so when I got back into that class, I utilized tutoring, and I was there every time it was available, right? Because I wasn't going to get it on my own. So I think that's sort of twofold of like leverage the resources that are available to you, especially for me as a student of color. There were special programs that I could utilize that helped me get through and were instrumental in my success as a student, and especially for the more difficult classes that I had to take. And this is Ren, my son. I will say though, also math is very important. I don't use it in my job today, but I use it in life, right? So like it is important for your financial future as well. So
Yeah, absolutely. Sadia, anything to add about the coursework?
Yeah, the only thing I want to add is I do want to decouple school from career a little bit as well, because I know for me personally, especially when you're taking these math courses or even the hard engineering courses, a lot of times it's like, do I really have to do this for the rest of my life? Because I'm going to be honest, they suck. Undergrad was difficult. That was, a lot of times pursuing those degrees, it was harder than some other majors could be, and people get deterred by that. But there's a difference between what you're going through in school and how much you utilize those things. And in my career, despite the fact that I worked at Texas Instruments, the godfather of calculators and a lot of math in that sense, and then my other companies as well, I still pull out my cell phone calculator, and that's how I do math in my day-to-day. And that even those simple math like offerings on a basic calculator are enough to get me through my job, because I don't use those things in my day-to-day anymore. There's a lot of other skills that come into play, and honestly, you learn on the job. Every company is so different. What you actually do is so different from the pure calculus that you're going to learn in school. So in some ways, I encourage you to kind of get through it. College is important. Get through those classes, get those grades, but don't worry about having to do calculus in your job every day, because there are plenty of STEM jobs that don't require that level of knowledge to be applied every day.
Yeah, and something great that I'm hearing from all of you, right, is that everybody agrees computer science, engineering, challenging career in college, right? A lot of times you're going to be taking classes when you're like, what am I doing? This is really difficult. Where can I get extra support? Am I really in the right place, right? You start to have all of those things, doubting yourself. But it sounds like kind of in this field, when you're in the actual career in which you're applying these things, those classes that you're taking in Raul, this is kind of the world that you are currently in as a computer science major in college, right? The classes are going to be difficult, but it almost seems like a rite of passage for all of you who end up in computer science and engineering. That it was something challenging, but it's something that everybody goes through just to kind of build the skills. It sounds like not only just to have the background, but also just to grind, right? Because the work that you guys do, you're all working really, really hard. And it sounds like that's a big part of the education as well. One question that was put here too that I'd love to pose to you as well, or kind of what should high school students be doing? What are kind of opportunities for them at that age that could help prepare them for experience in the corporate world, or could help prepare them for opportunities in computer science or engineering?
Okay. Yeah, I would say really try to focus and hone in on if you are going to go for STEAM or STEM or engineering, which discipline you want to actually go for. And it's okay if you don't know, because I'll be honest, I changed my major about a year into college. So I added about 1 or 2 more semesters on top of what I was already doing by doing that, but I don't regret it at all. But definitely hone in on like, okay, is this what I really want to do? Do I really want to do this? Is it something that's really in me to do? Because like once you're in it, like you're in it, and it's hard, right? So you don't want to like start necessarily quit on yourself. So definitely be sure about that. Always network. Networking is key, right? Building your brand is key. Like for yourself, I mean, your name is a brand. It doesn't have to be Apple or Amazon or any of that. Like your name, when you wake up every day, is a brand. It's you, right? And so you want who you are, your reputation, your character to be looked at in a positive light. So definitely build your brand, network, and be sure about like what you want to do.
Right. Sadia, any tips for high school students?
Yeah, so I think looking back when I was in high school, I had this overwhelming need to figure out, what am I going to major in? What classes do I need to take? How do I set my life forward? And it can be so overwhelming that sometimes you stress yourself out and don't accomplish anything. And so especially in high school, what I would say is, as much as it's important to set goals, you don't have to feel the need to know where you're headed and what you're going to do. And in fact, that's the time where you explore different things, and you don't have to pigeonhole yourself into one specific thing. Honestly, like the world we live in today, you're not just an engineer or just any one thing anymore. Everything comes together, whether it's arts, math, science. So for me, what I wanted to maintain through high school as well as college was, how do I keep my options open, and how do I learn a little bit of everything, so that, wherever I end up, I'm not closing any doors for myself. So take AP classes wherever they're available. If you don't have a lot of AP classes available, you can nowadays learn so much online, random online courses. And I would not underestimate the value of high school clubs and organizations as well. It doesn't matter whether you're going to engineering or fashion or tech or whatever discipline you go into, when you're able to say that I was president of this organization, or I was a member of this organization, I volunteered here, I did this, I did that, those experiences show that you are well-rounded. You have these different things you care about. You're willing to take leadership roles. You're willing to get involved and collaborate. My resume when I was a college student, or even in high school, was not companies and internships. And I'll be honest, I didn't have a single internship on my resume when I got my first job. What was on my resume were these high school organizations and clubs I was a part of. And those in itself were enough to add value to get me my first job. So again, own whatever it is that you have access to, and take advantage of that, and just continue to learn, especially in high school, to see, what do I like? What do I not like? Figuring out what you hate is actually forward progress, believe me, because it's hard making that decision. And that way, when you're going into college, you have more clarity if you've involved yourself in more things of what really stood out to you, and where were you successful? What did you enjoy?
That's great. Jamila, any kind of final thoughts about tips for high school students?
I don't think I have much to add to that. That was pretty comprehensive. I'll just reiterate that you don't have to have it figured out yet. There you have a lot of life to live, right? So you can try things and decide it's not for you. And I think just encouraging them to try lots of things. If you're interested in something, you have access to so many resources now, right? That you can explore them. And if you decide it's not for you, then it's not for you, and that's okay. But you have time to figure it out. Don't feel like you have to know. Even going into college, if you declare a major, right? Like I think Tyrone was saying, he changes his major, right? It happens all of the time. And just, being okay with that and with change.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So speaking of internships, Raul, I'd love, just because, you are currently a college student, you just had an internship at Google this past summer. Can you maybe end us out today, just sharing a little bit more about how you got an internship at Google kind of during COVID, right? There were probably some extra elements to that. Maybe any tips that you have for high school students to share.
Yeah, so actually, my story with Google actually starts the year after my high school, my senior year. So I did this sort of like summer program at Google, where it was sort of like a boot camp for like computer science and majors. And sort of from there, like I was like, I guess kind of connected with Google, and that program taught me a lot in sort of understanding that computer science was something that I wanted to do. So after that program, I was very invested in, figuring out if there was a path for me at Google, and some of the engineers that were involved at that bootcamp also helped me sort of develop, a proper resume, and eventually gave me all the tips to prepare. Um, and so my sophomore year, I decided to apply for an internship, and yeah, luckily I got in. And yeah, so, and my experience at the internship was very interesting, obviously because of COVID. A thing that was brought up earlier was sort of onboarding during the pandemic. That was something very difficult, especially as an internship. You don't really know what's going on, I'm sure, even if there wasn't a pandemic, and it just made it a little bit harder. But I enjoyed my time there a lot. I learned a lot, and it was very good.
That's great. Yeah. And something that you shared, Raul, that I think connects to some of the questions that our audience has been asking is, what can I do? What things should I explore? Even if I am in high school, or even in your case, you had just graduated from high school, right? And you pursued a summer boot camp at Google, right? I'm sure there are a lot of companies that offer those types of opportunities. And so I think kind of a sentiment that we've heard from all of our panelists, and I think, Raul, that you just reinforced with your own experience and your own successes, is how important it is to pursue those types of opportunities. You mentioned, Raul, that in your internship, there were, senior engineers who ended up mentoring you, supporting you as you developed your resume, as you developed your experiences, as you prepared for interviews, right? That help is invaluable. So I think that just keeping an open mind, being open to pursuing your passions. It sounds like we've had a lot of people today talk about how sometimes you change your mind within this field of, do you want to do software? Do you want to do hardware? Do you want to do gaming? Do you want to do virtual reality, right? So there are a lot of moving pieces, and it sounds like kind of the main message is to just believe in yourself, to keep working hard, to be open to networking. I know Tyrone mentioned that over and over, right? How important it is to meet people and develop those key relationships. So again, I can't thank you all enough for being a part of this today, for sharing your insights, your experiences, and just helping to inspire all of the people on the call. So thank you again so much to all of you, and for sharing time with us on your Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks everyone so much.
All right. You guys have a good one.
Bye. Happy
Yes,
holidays.
you too.
All right.
Bye-bye.